We all know the devastating impact COVID has had around the world. It has impacted each country differently, but everyone has been affected. We have been fortunate in Australia that it has not been as severe as other parts of the world. And we acknowledge the amazing work of educators who have taught remotely for the majority of the last 12 months. What we are sharing is specific to our experience, but we feel that our research and learnings do have value not just for our community, but the wider education sector. Indeed, much of what we have learned is nothing new. It has been spoken about by leading educators for the past 10 plus years. What COVID has done has not only fast-tracked innovation and forced teachers to adapt, but crystallised what we see as important for a holistic education.
It's no secret that 2020 disrupted what we're used to and what we call normal within the education space as we know it. This posed the challenge to us as educators of how we can best navigate around the uncertainties we faced while maintaining our college vision to enable our students to walk confidently into their futures. During a period where we had to adapt to COVID restrictions and remote learning, our focus was drawn to one of our 5 strategic pillars, personal capacity. This was the key development area that would allow us to further clarify what our college values in personal and professional development. The problems and challenges we initially faced were an opportunity to strategically refine our understanding of student learning and staff educating. An opportunity riding the dangerous wind.
On return from remote learning, we surveyed students from Year 5 to Year 12, so that's around 800 students, and we sent a survey out to all our college families, with about 600 families in the college. We wanted to get information on areas of remote learning such as student anxiety, engagement, level of learning, autonomy, flexibility, independence, IT skills, things that we were going to take and actually see that we were going to incorporate into learning in the future. And we had a fantastic response, and we could collate all of this. We broke it down into year groups and also male and female responses to see if there was any trends there. But we got some really interesting feedback which we'd like to share with you. When we look at the survey results for increased autonomy, we found that 82% of students found that remote learning increased their autonomy and that they appreciated and enjoyed that. This was slightly higher in senior students. Our younger students was around 70%, just because they weren't as familiar with secondary and maybe didn't have the skills needed to thrive. We had 75% of students say that their productivity increased with remote learning. The thinking behind this is they were able to take large chunks of the day and focus on one specific subject as opposed to chopping and changing different classes and different teachers throughout the day. 70% of students said that they were more alert and had improved attention and energy with a later start to school. They could get themselves organised in the morning, sleep in if they needed to, but also better prepare themselves for the day ahead. 66% of students believe that they would like to take a blended course in the future, combining face-to-face teaching and classroom activities with online work, because that would be beneficial for their learning and how they can fit more into their day. 75% of students found their online school experience the same or better than just normal face-to-face teaching. We think the independence, the autonomy, the flexibility that online learning enabled was the reason behind this. So as we can see, we had some challenges during remote learning, as all schools have, but we also had some areas that really developed and grew. And it's these areas, especially around personal capacity, grit, self-regulation, overcoming obstacles that we can take forward and we can actually see as a positive learning experience. No one wants to go back to completely remote learning, of course, but we feel that there's elements that we can take and we can embed into just what our regular day-to-day teaching and learning is in order to enable our students to grow in a positive way.
Out of the survey results and current research, we engaged a range of staff in the design thinking process. From this, a variety of ideas and initiatives were created to help us capitalise on the positive learnings that came from our recent experience. Ideas such as increasing student autonomy and flexibility, diverse pathways, and as we are about to explore, how we could provide opportunities for increased learner agency with a deliberate focus on student voice and choice. So we start the unit like we would normally do. There's a fresh cohort of students in the second semester, and I start with just a sort of base level understanding of where kids are at. So we give them a basic quiz around basic coding principles, and we wait for the feedback. So I get the results back and gives me a good spread, nothing different to any other year, where you've got quite a diversity of range of skills and abilities. And but the one thing that caught my eye was a comment with the submission from one of our students. I'm not quite sure where the challenging part is going to come in all this. Which to me was an interesting provocation to then go and ask some more questions.
And then Mr. Muller was like, let's create a project for you guys.
So we kind of got taken aside and told about an extension project opportunity.
So the consensus was made with about 4 or 5 students that ended up coming together out of that class that they wanted to develop an app. So we had a conversation about, well, if you were to develop an app, what would it be? And that's where they got stuck and they weren't quite sure what they would do. We talked about some of the problems that we've seen since coming back to school, or what we saw during COVID-19. And here at the college, we had a cafeteria that opened not long before COVID hit. And they did an amazing job during COVID responding and how they changed their business model. So they had a range of issues that they came across.
The ordering system for the Lanes Cafe didn't work too well with the whole thing, the contact tracing and stuff. So we had to come up with a solution to be able to order online, so to have an official app that people could order through.
So all those things were discussed with the students, and so we follow quite organically through the design thinking process with these students. And they embraced it.
The value of design thinking really comes in making something that's actually useful. A lot of the time, if we're just working on something, general, like follow the criteria and get the 25 out of 25 or whatever, you end up with something that satisfies the rubric, but you don't end up with something that is actually useful or that you see is actually useful to people. When you're using design thinking and you're focusing on empathizing with a real world problem and real people that have that real problem, like Sharon, you can really start to see how your solution can have an impact.
And so they started developing the Lanes Cafe app and ordering system, which has a range of different features. The end of the story is that they did develop a great product, which is still in prototype and being tested, but it's a really functional and excellent product.
That's a pretty cool concept, right? When you create something, to have real people using something that you've created, that's good motivation, I guess, to get something done.
We had to play to our strengths. Some of us were better at HTML and CSS, some of us was better at Java.
I realised the importance of how people work together in a team.
What we then did is we pushed them a bit further and we said, okay, let's make this more real. You now need to pitch this to a real world app developer. And we put them in the boardroom on Zoom pitching their product like you would in the real world to an investor perhaps.
It was tricky because some of the questions were quite in depth.
My recommendation would be to focus less on the testing from the perspective of bugs and more on testing from the perspective of does it serve the needs of the cafe?
The developer dug deep and pushed them to really show how good their coding was, how good their planning, what strategies they took on to actually solve certain problems. And he was really impressed.
I think I join with everybody else, like the amount of work you've done and the amount of time you've had, as well as adding a learning process on top of that, is absolutely phenomenal. There are people in the professional world who can't achieve what you guys have done. So I think you really need to not just pat yourselves on the back, but really acknowledge that you've undertaken a significant amount of work that would normally take months and months and months, and you've condensed it down to that 6 to 8 week period. So congratulations on that.
So watching the students go through that whole process and then reflecting at the end of the different skills they developed, the way that they just naturally embraced each other's different skill sets and abilities, the way that they helped each other learn things, and the way that they quickly identified who had what skills and how that could be utilised in the project moving forward. So where we're at now, with that, as I said, the prototype app is in place, but we're really seeing this as an example of when we take away the restrictions of needing to follow the bouncing ball of curriculum and giving students more agency, some great things can happen. How do we actually reflect that back to parents? So that's the big question with our transcript that we're developing, so we can actually reflect back on some of those personal capacity skills that are being developed and actually trace and track the journey that these students have gone through in a range of different skills. And also helping them develop a folio of their work so that in the real world, when they hit possible opportunities for internships or further employment, that they've got something that they can show a potential employer.
To highlight this, we are developing what we believe will be a key component of what it means to be a learner at St Andrews Anglican College. The development of the personal capacity transcript or learner profile is our next challenge in further articulating how we can present to parents, students, future employers and universities a complete 360-degree view of the learner.
I hadn't really worked with like a group of this size on a project of this scale before, but I think it's allowed me to see the value in really like the whole collaborative process.
Through the task, I learned about myself, how I am able to overcome the challenges and succeed when I didn't think I could.
I learned that I can basically learn whatever I want to learn, whenever I want to learn it. So most of the things I learned was online because there was no like proper class teaching, or I learned it from my group.
We are still in the early stages of what is an exciting exploration into the possibilities for our college and our students as we begin to dream of what school could be in the next 2, 5 or 10 years.
We are also conscious of the need to bring our parents along on this journey and to highlight to them what it is we are discovering about their children, the remarkable capacity they have as learners, and the need to move forward together in preparation for this uncertain future.